We're going to deal with Abraham. The third part, we're going to deal with Isaac. And the fourth part, we're going to talk about the Levite and his concubine. But today we're just covering part number 1 of part number 3, right? Of the residue of a lot. And so the third way that you know that you have got a residue of a lot inside of your mind, body, soul, and spirit, and your heart, is when you are faced with a spirit of fear, you resort to intergenerational / multi-generational trauma, strongholds, and dysfunctional patterns of behavior. And when it came to Lot, he used his family, friends, and loved ones as pawns for his own protection by throwing people under the bus. And this was not just when it came to Lot. This is when it came to Lot, when it came to Abraham, when it came to Isaac, right? And when it came to the Levite and his concubine. All of these individuals used their family, friends, and loved ones as pawns for their own protection of throwing people under the bus, right? Lot was willing to give his virgin daughters to immoral and perverted men for pleasure to avoid himself and or the angels being the target. And you would think to yourself, where did Lot get this from? And when we talk about Lot, we are also talking about a person. When I say you've got the residue of a lot, I'm talking about a person that's an extra person in your life, right? Somebody that you shouldn't be taking to the next level, like Abraham shouldn't have been, right? That represents your lot. And then the other thing, when you say, like a person said, you got a lot going on. So I'm also referring to not just the person of a lot that you're taking with you that should not have gone to the next level when God told you it was time to elevate you, but it also means an excess of people, of places, of things and ideas. And when it comes to those ideas, think about different ideologies, worldviews, belief systems that's been embedded in you from childhood, right? Dealing with childhood trauma, dealing with where you've been in legalistic churches that thrived off of fear and guilt. Also from schools you've attended. Also some friendships and friend groups and support groups or whatever kind of groups you've been in, right? Members of. You've also basically adopted some of their belief systems, right? And so what happened is that when Lot was faced with this fear, he had one of 4 ways he could respond. He could have responded with fight. He could have responded with flight. He could have responded with freeze, or he could have responded with fawn / please appease, where you try to please your abuser, right? / the toxic individual. And so I want to read Genesis 19, 1 through 29, so you can understand. Well, actually, not even 1 through 29. I'm going to read 1 through 12. I don't even have to go all the way to 29 for you to understand what happens. It says in Genesis 19, and I'm starting at 1. The 2 angels entered Sodom in the evening as Lot was sitting in Sodom's gateway. When Lot saw them, he got up to meet them. He bowed with his face to the ground and said, "My lords, turn aside to your servant's house, wash your feet and spend the night. Then you can get up early and go on your way." "No," they said, "we would rather spend the night in the square." But he urged them so strongly that they followed him and went into his house. He prepared a feast and baked unleavened bread for them, and they ate. Before they went to bed, the men of the city of Sodom, both young and old, the whole population, surrounded the house. They called out to Lot and said, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Send them out so we can have sex with them." Lot went out to them at the entrance and shut the door behind him. He said, "Don't do this evil, my brothers. Look, I've got 2 daughters who haven't been intimate with a man. I'll bring them out to you. You can do whatever you want to them. However, don't do anything to these men because they have come under the protection of my roof." Get a load of that. You are willing to give your daughters, your virgin daughters, up to the men so that nothing would happen to the guests you have in your household and nothing would happen to you. Talk about throwing under the bus. Talk about father wounds. Talk about pain and trauma and lack of protection as a dad, as a father figure in the household. Talk about the first person that you see to have an example of how a man should treat you before you get married. This is what Lot showed his daughters, right? His daughters had a lot going on. They had the residue in their mind, body, souls, and spirit of a lot, right? Get out of the way, they said, adding, this one came here as an alien, but he's acting like a judge. So they're basically saying, like, who are you? You act like you all of that, like you live in this town, this mess here. You live in Sodom and Gomorrah. You've been doing what we doing, so who are you to say anything? That's basically what they were saying to him, right? It says, now we'll do more harm to you than to them. So they're basically like, if you don't get out of the way, you think we're going to do something to the angels, we're really going to jack you up. Basically is what they were saying, right? They put pressure on Lot and came up to break down the door. Now, you know this is intense if they're going to be willing to break down the door to get to these men. But Lot is like, hey, take my daughters, right? This is a mess. Generational strongholds. Generational dysfunction of patterns of behavior, right? Generational what? Trauma. Intergenerational trauma. And it says, but the angels reached out, brought Lot into the house with them and shut the door. They struck the men who were at the entrance of the house, both young and old, with blindness, so they were unable to find the entrance. And this is the sad, that was through verse 11. That was Genesis 19, 1 through 11. Now I want you to think about this now. Really, really think about this. Lot was willing to give his daughters to save himself and to save the two men that came into his house. Forget about protecting them, right? Forget about the father wounds and the pain and trauma that he caused them. Forget about the wounding of their souls. He's willing to actually have their souls wounded. His virgin daughters for what? Protection of himself, right? Where did Lot get this from? Was it from his father who passed away? Was it from Abraham? Because we're going to dissect Abraham next week, right? Abraham has some issues going on because he threw Sarah under the bus. So was it from his father? Was it from Abraham? Was it from his grandfather? Was it just that this is just, and one thing about it is that a lot of times the old folks would say, and even some people do now, when you mention certain things, violations that's been done to certain people, well, that's just how they did back in the day. So mess with this person and mess with that person. And they give it a cute name to basically cover up violation and sin and pain and trauma. And that's how they did, that's how they did back in the day. But how they did back in the day, does it make it right? So did Lot sit around with Abraham and discuss, well, that's how our ancestors did back in the day. So it's okay for me. Did Lot model Abraham? Did Lot model his father? Did Lot model all of the men in his family who threw women under the bus? Obviously, this was what? This was status quo for them. This was status quo. This is exactly what they were taught to do. There is no coincidence. And here you go, Isaac, who was not even born at the time that Abraham, violated his wife by leaving her out without protection. And we'll dissect that more next week. Here we go with him doing the same exact thing, right? And so think about it. When you have the residue, and residue is like something that's left over. You don't realize a lot of times that you got some residue in your heart and mind and body and soul and spirit, until sometimes you just hear somebody speaking about something and you're scrolling on Instagram or you're scrolling on YouTube and strolling on Facebook and you hear somebody talking about something. They talking about mother wounds or father wounds and I'm a quick fast scroll past that. And a lot of times that's quick and fast and scroll past that real easy. A lot of times that's that residue. Something is being tinged in your soul and telling you this is for you. But you just scroll on past it. As you feeling a fight in your soul and the spirit and your heart and in your mind and your body that something is off. And that's because that's your area to deal with, right? What kind of residue do you have left over in you from a lot? Is it a person that left that residue? Or is it just that you got a lot going on and you got to remove some of that lot, some of that excess of people, places, things, and ideas? These ideologies about women, ideologies about men, belief systems and worldviews that's limited worldviews, toxic belief systems, right? Toxic ways of reasoning. And even over in 2 Corinthians, it says what? Casting down imaginations and every high thing that's exalting itself against the knowledge of God, bringing into captivity every thought into the obedience of Christ. What have you been thinking about? What have you been focusing on? What residue is left over in that dish you thought you cleaned, right? There's a residue on the inside and the outside looking clean, as Jesus told the disciples, right? Basically, he told them, you did a good job of cleaning, not the disciples, but the Pharisees. You did a good job on the outside. The outside looked good and presentable. We want to worry about image, but the inside of the heart is what matters. What is going on in the inside? Did you clean the inside of that bowl, right? Or the inside of that fork, the inside of that spoon? Or did you just make the outside nice and shiny, right? Did you clean the inside of your dresser and the drawers are packed with all kind of filth, right? Stay tuned for next week when we talk about the residue of a lot, part 3B. Be blessed.